bringing the brother back alive would just get rid of that completely. Be like, oh, okay, so I guess I didn't kill you. Hello, how have you been? What's up, everybody? This is Zoya, the Russian Korean, and welcome to another Explore the Lore episode. So as we know, there are new champions coming out, one right after another, and one of those champions is going to be, yes, Yasuo's deceased brother. Now, because I have not really done anything related to Yasuo, I really don't know too much about the background and who his brother is and, you know, what's the story, basically. So I thought that it would be worthwhile to actually... and it's also a good time for me to make an Explore the Lore Yasuo video. So it's gonna be one of those videos where I dive into a specific champion. I think so far I've really done it only for Zed and maybe partially for Senna and Lucian, but I didn't really look too specifically into each of them. So Yasuo really, I think, after Zed, is really the second champion that I'm doing more of an in-depth Explore the Lore video for. But the format is going to be a little different. So usually what happens in my Explore the Lore videos is that I kind of go into the exploration without any prior research. So basically I explore, right? Hence the Explore the Lore title. I explore everything on camera, you know, and it's kind of like a react exploration, sort of. But this time, because Yasuo has so many stories, and basically his whole lore is based on these stories, you can't really, you know, go into it without reading them, and it's very hard to read those long stories on camera. It'll just like, it'll be a... It'll take forever to film. So this time what I did was off camera, I actually read the stories myself and then thought about what I want to say in the video in terms of what I learned from the stories and talk about the story specifically and then just offer, you know, my little opinion on it if, you know, if it's of any value. And then hopefully it's going to help me understand, you know, the reason, I guess, behind bringing his brother back into the picture, so to say, and yeah, how that is going to pan out. Of course, these are mostly all going to be just speculations because we won't know for sure what exactly his brother is going to be as a champion until he actually comes out. But there is fun in speculation, so let's get into this. So here we are on the universe page for Yasuo, and you can tell there is his login theme, I guess you could call it. I'm pretty sure he has one. Yeah, right at the bottom of the page. But yep, he is an Ionian champion, as most of us know. And yep, his role is a fighter. And yes, the other thing about him is that when you read his stories, there are two other champions that play kind of a heavy role, I guess, in his lore. And those are two girls, Talia and Riven. And so I will talk about them a little bit when I talk about the stories that concern them, but for now, let's just jump into his biography. So his bio, you can read it right here, but actually there is a little comic strip right underneath it that basically summarizes the biography, so I kind of don't know why the biography is there, or anyway. Let's just read the comic strip to get the general idea of his bio. Yasuo was born a bastard, half-brother to his village's pride and joy, shunned as a warning and a mistake. But his brother Yone embraced him, so Yasuo followed him to sword school, refusing to leave until they reunited. Discovering his natural talent, Elder Soma, the last master of the legendary wind technique, took Yasuo as his apprentice. Yasuo felt he was destined for greatness, and he would prove it at any cost. When war came to Ionia, Yasuo was ordered to stay behind to protect the elders, but when he heard Noxian war drums echoing over the valley, he abandoned his post, confident he could turn the tide of the battle. By the time he reached the battlefield, it was too late to help. And by the time he returned to the school, it was too late once again. In his absence, Elder Soma had been murdered, and Yasuo was accused of the terrible deed. Defiant, he ran certain he could prove his innocence if he could find the real killer. Before he could, he was hunted down by Yone. Trapped between love and duty, the men raised their weapons. Yasuo's skill was too great, and he killed his beloved brother. Consumed with grief and guilt, Yasuo knows nothing can undo the mistakes of his past, yet still he searches for absolution with only the wind to guide him. Yep, so we got this comic strip that basically explains the overarching background for Yasuo. I guess you could call him an illegitimate kid. So his mom was a widow, and this man just showed up, and yep, they made a baby, and the baby was Yasuo. And so he is a half-brother to Yone, who is kind of like the complete opposite of him. He is not as impulsive. He is very reserved, respectable, skilled, talented, you know, everything that older siblings usually feel like they are. And, you know, Yasuo really admires his older brother and wants to be like him, I think. At the same time, I feel like for Yasuo, he can never be good enough, you know, in comparison to his brother. Of course, those of us who do have older siblings, we might be able to relate to Yasuo's struggle here. I mean, I have an older brother, and my older brother is like so damn perfect. He actually isn't. But he definitely is a good example for me as well in the way that he handles things and the way that he takes responsibility. You know, I think those qualities of older siblings should be admired and encouraged. But regardless, Yasuo is the second brother, but he's extremely talented, very gifted, and so he is taken in by Master Soma, who kind of recognizes his talent and wants to teach him the wind technique. And so, as the bio says, when Yasuo leaves his guarding post in, I guess, the surge of his impulsive ego, he comes back and his master is dead. Somebody murdered him, and because Yasuo was gone, people assume that he was the one who killed him, or because Yasuo was missing, let's put it that way. Another thing that the bio also mentions, and the reason why most people started blaming Yasuo, is because it kind of looked like you know, from the scene that the master was murdered with the wind technique, which apparently was only mastered by the master himself and his disciple, Yasuo. And I guess his brother too, but his brother was in the battle, and so, like, his brother couldn't have been the culprit, kind of. And so, yeah, he is now this rogue warrior just traveling by himself in search of his master's murderer. Kind of a, I'll be honest with you, kind of a cliche story in terms of like, if you've ever read any of the Japanese tales of these rogue samurai that walk around without a master because they've slayed their master or they were falsely accused of slaying their master. Like, there are so many stories like that. But I guess the reason why there are so many stories is because these stories work. You know, they capture people's attention. And, you know, a warrior falsely accused of something dishonorable, but all they have to themselves is honor, I guess is an interesting dynamic. And so people want to see more of those kinds of stories. And so Yasuo's stories here unfolds in a number of different short stories here. But before we delve into the stories, let's just maybe look at his artwork here. There's not a whole lot of it, surprisingly, but here we go. Yasuo in action. The blue and the yellow, of course, because the two are contrasting each other, is a really nice combination. Early Yasuo concept. I'm guessing early on Yasuo did not have much hair. He also looks a lot older. His pauldron also, I guess, was not there. And this is a Yasuo color model. And the Yasuo sword. I'm guessing there were multiple concepts for it. Or is this like sheathed, unsheathed? Is that what we're doing here? I think it's just different concepts. Yasuo black and white concept. That's from his splash art. It almost looks like his pants are inflated. Alright, and that's the art gallery. There is the featured video, which is the Yasuo login theme. Let's take a look.
A lot of people want me dead. They call it justice. I'm the only one who knows the truth. All I have left is the wind by my side.
Oh, yeah. I actually like this login theme because it's like a little animation with a story in it, you know? It's not just like him sitting there, which is what a lot of the login themes are. It's just them and stuff animated around them, but here he's actually like doing something. So I never noticed the little bamboo cup detail because in his lore he does tend to try to drink his sorrows away. Another kind of a cliche concept, but nevertheless, a nice detail right there. Of course, in the music itself, you can definitely hear that this is kind of Japanese inspired here, everything. That is actually it for, you know, the visual part of the champion's lore. And now we're going to move on to the stories, and I will talk about them in the order in which they came out, I'm assuming. So we're going to go from bottom and go back up. So the first one is a short story by Joe Lansford, or Joey Lansford, and it's called A Sword Without a Sheath. In this story, we are looking at Yasuo from Yone's perspective. It's actually a very short story, like really short. But I thought that this story was worth mentioning because we get to hear a little bit from Yone himself, and I think that gives you a little bit of an insight into his character and also his outlook on what I guess Yasuo is doing. Another thing here is that this is Yone talking about Yasuo right before he goes out to confront him about the alleged accusations against Yasuo for killing his master. So basically this is Yone talking right before he died. And here's what he says. Fearing my brother had strayed too far from the way, I went not to warn him, but to make an appeal to his honor. I gave him a maple seed, our school's highest lesson in humility. One Yasuo seemed to have forgotten. A seed is just a seed, but given time, one may come to know the beauty it holds within. So this is the main contrast between the two brothers, in my opinion, in that Yasuo is impulsive and just kind of does what he wants to do, whereas Yone has, I guess, this air of responsibility. He's a lot more humble than Yasuo, at least before Yone died, right? Because once Yone does die, I think it changes Yasuo very much. He kind of takes on a lot of the qualities of his older brother and does become a lot quieter and more humble and reserved. So you would think that Yone, as an older brother who is, you know, in many ways kind of better in the eyes of society than his younger brother, that he would, you know, look down on his younger brother kind of patronizingly, but he doesn't do that. There's actually something that he says in the story which I think is interesting because it reveals kind of another it reveals an insecurity, I guess, that Yone has. Here's what he says. Today, it seems clear to me that Yasuo murdered the very person he was sworn to protect. He has betrayed his nation, his friends, and himself. Were it not for my actions, I wonder if he would ever have been swept down this dark path. So you can see here that Yone also tends to, I guess, believe that Yasuo is the one who murdered the master, but he is blaming himself, it seems like, for what Yasuo allegedly did, which again shows that he has this kind of responsibility on his shoulders that even when his younger brother messes up, he is the one kind of taking responsibility. So anyway, I just thought it was an interesting detail, I guess, about Yone. The next story in Yasuo's lore is called The Bird and the Branch. And this one is occurring after the events of the master's murder and also the brother's death. And so Yasuo is out by himself and he, in this story, meets Talia. Now, this story is from Talia's perspective, and it's a story of how she basically became Yasuo's student. Let me just quickly summarize it so you get a general idea of the story. So Talia was fleeing from Noxus that wanted to use her power to destroy a village in Ionia, and she did not want to use her power to destroy, so she fled from Noxus, ran away, and it's winter and really cold, and she's by herself, pretty much dying from starvation and from freezing.
After some time, they end up at an inn where they hear rumors of Shurima's lost city coming back to life. They get found by the guards who want to kill Yasuo. Together, they fight with the guards and overpower them, and then once they flee, Talia wishes to return to Shurima, and she asks Yasuo to come with her.
But of course, Yasuo says he has unfinished business here in Ionia, and also says that he doesn't think that she is ready to go back, but Talia insists, and so they have to part ways. But before they do, Talia gives him a thread from her clothes as a keepsake, and he uses it to tie his messy hair back up. So, you know, the hair tie that he has is actually from Talia. And he, in return, gives her the maple seed, which his older brother gave him. It's like a really precious keepsake for him in memory of his brother, and he gives it to Talia, which is a lesson in humility. He also tells her a way to get to Freljord from where she would be able to find her way back to Shurima. And so this is the way that they part with each other. So that's basically the summary of The Bird and the Branch by Ariel Lawrence. I forgot to mention the author in the beginning. I mean, this story is a little more about Talia than about Yasuo, but I think it still gives you a good idea of, you know, what kind of person Yasuo is. So he takes on a student. He is not somebody who hoards the knowledge of the elements all to himself. He, you know, invests in this person and cares about her. He gives her the most prized possession that he has, which is the maple seed from his brother. I'm sure somewhere out there must be some people shipping the two together. Personally, I don't really see that kind of potential in their relationship, just because I feel like she's a lot younger than him. And also, I mean, age is age, right? But I feel like also they just have such different paths in life that I just don't see them really cross each other romantically in that sense. You know what I mean? And honestly, I would rather just keep this relationship as a student-teacher kind of a relationship rather than, you know, two lovers or something. But there is, of course, this dynamic of opposites attract in a way because she's very lively and cheerful and, you know, optimistic, and he's kind of reserved and keeps to himself and quiet. Seems to get annoyed with her liveliness sometimes. But yeah, unless some new reveals show anything else other than a student-teacher relationship, then I will just stick with what I see here in the story. Okay, and now we are moving on to the big stuff, okay? Because there are 3 stories, which are actually one big story on the Yasuo Universe page, and those are Confessions of a Broken Blade. And there are 3 parts, and they're also written by Ariel Lawrence. There is also one short story here. It's called The Road to Ruin, but it's really short, and I don't think it really gives any more insight into Yasuo's lore than what we've already talked about. It kind of goes off of the bio, so I'm not going to really talk about that too much. So let's move on to the Confessions of a Broken Blade. And so this story is actually, I think, kind of crucial for the lore behind not just Yasuo, but also another champion that is involved in the story, and that champion is the Noxian Riven. Now, again, I don't really know too much about Riven, so this was actually, for me, I think a pretty good introduction into the Riven lore as well. So the 3 stories are pretty long, but I am going to attempt to summarize them just so that I can, you know, talk about my conclusions from them. Alright, so in part 1, Riven, who is a Noxian in hiding as a farmer with an old couple in Yasuo's village, she's arrested for accusations of Master Soma's death. Now, remind you, Master Soma is the guy that Yasuo is accused of murdering. Shortly before her arrest, she has a brief encounter with Yasuo, who tries to talk with her, but she doesn't respond. He disappears right before she's arrested, and the story continues with the old couple's visit to the tribunal, where Riven would be judged. Yasuo is also secretly there. So that is part 1. Now, in part 2, the court hearing continues, and Riven doesn't have any memory of what brought her to Ionian and how she ended up with the old couple. It is revealed that the old man with whom Riven stayed saw her looking at her broken blade once. She didn't know that he was there, also seeing it. He secretly took the blade to the temple in hopes of priests being able to restore it, but the blade caught the attention of one of the temple's priests, the one who worked on Master Soma's body after his death, because he noticed a similarity between the blade and the piece that he found in Master Soma's neck. The pieces were put together in the court hall. The runic magic bound to the blade suddenly awakened. And when this happened, Riven was able to remember what she did, that she and the band of Ionians that gathered around her were, as far as I understand, betrayed by the very empire that they hoped would give them a future, so Noxus, and that she in the process killed Master Soma. Her sentence delayed until the next day. Riven is left in the hall to wait for her fate. Now, in terms of Master Soma's death in part 2, it's very vague. She just confesses to her being the murderer, but there's no details on how it happened or what exactly happened. And that is why we have part 3. In part 3, as Riven is sitting in the hall tied up, the old man with whom Riven has been living, along with his wife. So the old man sneaks into the hall and undoes Riven's cuffs, but at this moment, Yasuo himself shows up and wants to fight with Riven. He tells her to draw her blade, and as they duel, a piece from Riven's sword flies to where the old man was hiding right before Yasuo showed up. Thankfully, before the old man is killed by the deadly shard, Yasuo stops it with his wind. Of course, Riven is panicking because she loves the old man and the old woman so much, so she rushes to the old man and she's so relieved that she didn't end up killing, this person that she really cares about. And when Yasuo kind of sees her actions, sees that she cares about these people so much, he pronounces, "You killed Master Soma, but you did not murder him." And at these words, Riven's guilt and shame just spill into this frantic emotion, and she begs for forgiveness. She says she wanted Master Soma to help her get rid of the guilt she carried for the lives lost in the war. She felt the blame for it, the responsibility, and she wanted to break the blade and thereby break herself. Elder Soma was trying to help her break the blade, and I guess as the blade was breaking, a piece of it flew toward him and killed him. So in this way, it was kind of an accident. And so Yasuo responds to her saying, "Elder Soma was my responsibility. If I had been there that night, I could have protected him. It was not your intention to kill him. In the end, the fault of his death lies with me." Now, the reason why I mentioned this particular quote is because of the quote that I read earlier from A Sword Without a Sheath, which was from his brother's perspective, where Yone is saying, "Were it not for my actions, I wonder if he would ever have been swept down this dark path." So just as his older brother at one point was willing to take responsibility for Yasuo's actions, even without fully understanding what happened, here Yasuo now, it kind of comes full circle, right? Because the true identity of the murderer, or the accidental, I guess, murderer, the person responsible for what happened with Master Soma, is revealed. So yeah, we know now that it was Riven, but it kind of happened accidentally, unintentionally. And as Yasuo finds out, he not only forgives, but he also actually takes responsibility. And I think that is a huge growth in a character's development. Because if you think about it, he starts out, right, with nothing but vengeance on his mind, right? That is what he believes will atone him. But what does atone him is not only justice in terms of Riven actually being revealed as the true culprit, but also with him forgiving her, but not just forgiving her and blaming her for, blaming her and being like, "But I forgive you." He says, "You know what? I was the one responsible because I acted foolishly. I left, and if I were there, things would have been different." And the fact that he admits his own mistake in what he did, I think not only provides him with absolution, but also, in a way, redemption. Because I think just vocalizing, his own, I guess, regrets about what could have been is a good way of freeing yourself from something that has been holding you back all this time. Now, the story concludes with Riven being sentenced, so to say, to working in the village and making amends or reparations for the deaths that the people in the village suffered. So she's going to work for the old man and the old woman first, and then she's going to work for, the other people in the village. And of course, she is gladly accepting that sentence because you know, they say that it's a lot harsher because she's going to have to work out her freedom, right? And actually physically show her remorse. It's still, you know, she's not just getting executed here. It's not like this tragedy, right? And of course she's reunited with the old man, the old woman, and that's really all she wants. So I think with that, it's a good end to a pretty sad story, right? Because it's like these two very broken people with things that happen in their life that were kind of out of their control. And yeah, basically both of their lives have been ruined, but now there is hope for restoration for actually both of them, I think. So if you ask me, I really did like Confessions of a Broken Blade. I think the 3 parts were not only interesting and entertaining, but also satisfying in terms of character development. Now, of course, if you were reading this as the parts were released, you probably you know, had a pretty different experience, kind of like finding out and things getting revealed to you, especially after so many years of being in the gray about like, so who did murder Master Soma? And then when you find out, it's like, oh. But for me, because I just kind of binged everything in one day, I guess everything just kind of came together a lot easier. And with this, we are coming to the most recent story that was published on the Universe website, and that is Brotherhood, once again by Ariel Lawrence. And this story is kind of short, not very long. It doesn't really provide any important new information about the champion, but it's more of like this cute little anecdote. So here Yasuo encounters a small kid on the road. The kid's name is Joab, or Job. He's 6, and he took his older brother's kite without permission and of course got it stuck in the tree. When Job asks Yasuo for help and the latter uses his wind technique to get the kite out, the kid realizes that the man is the infamous Yasuo, the student who killed a great Ionian master. The kid, however, doesn't seem to be too afraid and just asks a bunch of questions. Yasuo simply replies that he can't be forgiven for a crime he didn't commit. Job's older brother soon comes. He carries with him a tool to get a kite out in case it got stuck somewhere, because an older brother always knows what his younger brother's up to. And so Yasuo tells Joab to listen to his older brother and leaves. So that's the story. Whether this story occurs before Confessions of a Broken Blade or after is kind of unclear, because the kid still seems to think that Yasuo is the one who murdered Master Soma, but at the same time, he is not from Yasuo's native village. It's made clear in the story. It may be that still in other villages surrounding it, the news haven't traveled so far, and so people still, you know, think the old rumors are true. Either way, it kind of doesn't matter. I think this story, you know, kind of plays on this dynamic between brothers once again, because of course, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, Yasuo's brother Yone is going to be a new champion in League of Legends. And I think this is actually a good transition into talking about Yone himself. So other than the stories that we have from Yasuo's Universe page, which we've discussed already, there's really only one other source of information, and that is Yone's card from Legends of Runeterra. Now, the artwork on his card, as you can see, is actually him right before he died. So this is Yone alive. Okay, in full armor, and there's speculation that this is actually what he looked like right before he went to encounter Yasuo himself, and so this is him right before his death. His card reads, "When I was a child, I asked my brother, does the wind flee or does it follow? He followed me then for guidance. I follow him now for justice." And his ability is Staggering Strikes, which stuns 2 enemies, so we kind of get an idea of what maybe one of his abilities is going to do. Now, it is worth mentioning that this card is not a champion card, it's a follower card. But nevertheless, he does have interactions with Yasuo, and some of his lines, you can kind of get a flavor for his character here.
Patience and virtue make a true swordsman. True power requires restraint. Humility before power. Dishonorable. Your end is my duty.
So just like we said before, duty, honor, patience, humility, you know, those seem to be the describing words for Yone. And so this basically brings us to an end in terms of Yasuo's lore and his brother's lore. And hopefully this will give a good background for some of you guys who maybe have not read these stories or don't know too much about Yasuo. Like, what is his brother gonna be like? What do we expect him to do, to say, and to look like? Personally, and I've talked about it with some of you guys who follow me on my Twitch channel. It's very interactive. I talk with you guys there, and we talk about a lot of the lore things there as well. And so, in my opinion, Yone cannot be alive. And what I mean by that is, of course, Riot can come up with some little backdoor backstory which would keep him alive somehow after all these years, and that he actually did not die and whatnot. But I highly doubt that they would do that, because in a way that would just ruin a lot of the character development behind Yasuo, because his growth and his change and his push into the unknown does happen because of his brother's death. It's not even necessarily because of his master's death. I think his master's death certainly brought a lot of disruption to his life, but I think it's the death of his brother that is the true catalyst to his kind of journey and change. Because in the case of the master, he was not the one who did it, but in case of his brother, he was the one who did it. Even though he might be absolved of his guilt when it comes to his master, with his brother is a completely different story. And so bringing the brother back alive would just get rid of that completely. Be like, oh, okay, so I guess I didn't kill you. Hello, how have you been? And then all they would need to do is just like, oh, by the way, yeah, I'm not the one who killed Master Soma. Riven was convicted, and yeah, so we're good now. I just don't see that happening in terms of the story. You know what I mean? So he might come back as some sort of ghost or some sort of undead, kind of like Senna, but I guess Senna never fully died, right? So anyway, they will have to come up with some sort of convincing story for me to actually be satisfied, I guess, in terms of how his lore is now going to be connected with Yasuo's lore and how they're going to continue, I guess, the conflict between the two brothers. But yeah, I just hope that he's not gonna come back alive. But anyways, guys, what do you think about Yasuo's lore? And what do you especially think about Yone coming back into the picture as a champion? Are you excited? What do you think he is going to be? Is he going to be some zombie walking around? Or you think actually they can legitimately bring him back to life? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. This was Zoya, the Russian Korean. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you next time.